The snowstorm had swallowed the town hall, turning every street into a silent white prison. But inside the tiny silver-trimmed diner on Maple Road, a single light flickered like a heartbeat fighting to stay alive. Lena, exhausted from a double shift, was scrubbing down the counter when the door slowly creaked open and a blast of icy wind swept in. Wrapped in a thin, warm blanket, an elderly woman stepped inside, shivering so hard her bones seemed to rattle. Her tired eyes, reddened from cold and years of hardship, searched the room as if begging for one small corner of the world where pain would pause, even just for a moment, before we continue. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of humanity, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps more people see stories that remind us the world still has good in it. Lena rushed to the woman immediately. Something about her wasn't just cold, she looked lost, heartbroken, and worn down by days of wandering. Gently, Lena guided her into a booth and wrapped her in an extra apron she kept for quiet nights. The woman's hands were icy. Her breathing was shallow. Snow melted from her shoes, forming a small puddle beneath the booth. Outside, the storm raged like a warning. But inside, Lena moved with calm urgency, heating soup, brewing tea, bringing anything warm she could find. The diner was nearly empty. Just the hum of a flickering bulb and the hiss of the coffee machine. Lena knew the rules said she wasn't supposed to let anyone shelter overnight. But the moment she looked at the trembling woman, the rules stopped mattering. She brought soup, stayed with her, and made sure she felt safe. Hours passed. Eventually, the woman fell asleep in the booth, her shoulders softening as if she had finally found a place where she didn't have to fight to survive. Lena draped her own coat over the woman and remained long after her shift ended. She refused to leave the diner managerless, and she refused to abandon her. Outside, the storm hurled its anger against the windows, but Lena stayed like a silent guardian until dawn. When morning light finally crept across the sky, she gently woke the woman. Confusion flickered in her eyes, followed by relief. She whispered, barely audible, "Thank you for seeing me." Before Lena could ask anything more, the woman quietly slipped out into the pale morning, disappearing like a fading memory. Word tugged at Lena's chest, but with the breakfast crowd arriving, she had to keep working. A few hours later, as the lunch rush died down, the diner door swung open again, this time not with hesitation, but with authority. A tall man in a perfectly tailored navy suit stepped inside. Snow dusted his shoulders, but his polished shoes looked untouched by the storm. His presence was sharp, commanding. His eyes scanned the diner before locking onto Lena with an intensity that made her heart stutter. He approached and asked, in a calm but weighted voice, if she was the young waitress who had worked through the storm. Lena nodded, unsure why he seemed to be studying her soul. The man introduced himself simply as Victor, though everything about him radiated the confidence of someone who belonged in boardrooms, not diners. He placed a photograph on the counter, the elderly woman Lena had sheltered. Lena's breath caught. She nodded again, fear rising that something terrible had happened. Victor's expression softened unexpectedly. He explained that the woman was his mother, who had gone missing from her care facility 2 days earlier, frightened and disoriented. Search teams had been looking everywhere, fearing the worst in the deadly cold, but that morning, she had returned home, safe, warm, fed, and she had spoken nonstop about the young woman who showed her kindness when the world didn't. Lena's throat tightened. She didn't think she had done anything special, just what any decent person should do. But Victor looked at her as if she had saved his world. Then he did something that left her stunned. He asked her to step outside for a moment. In the crisp post-storm air, he pointed to a sleek black car parked across the street. He told her his mother's story had shaken him to his core, reminding him that kindness, not money, was the true measure of humanity. He said he wanted to honor what Lena had done. Lena tried to refuse at first. insisting she hadn't helped for any reward. But Victor gently said something that made her eyes sting. Kindness should never leave the giver empty. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a letter written in shaky handwriting, and a check that made Lena gasp and cover her mouth. It was enough to clear her debts, pay her mother's medical bills, and finally let her breathe, maybe for the first time in years. Victor said it wasn't charity. It was his mother's belief. Repay kindness with opportunity. Tears blurred Lena's vision, not because of the money, but because for once, someone truly saw her. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe so more people can hear stories that restore hope and inspire kindness. And before we end, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Lena's place? On that snowy morning, Lena learned that the smallest act of kindness can return like a miracle, capable of changing a life forever.